Hey guys, today we're at a park in Langley, British Columbia, and we're checking out a really interesting box bike, cargo bike from Cube. This is called the Cube Cargo Sport Hybrid. Now they do have just a cargo hybrid, and you might say, well, what's the sport talking about? And it's really this drivetrain right here. So we have Shimano Deore. This is 11 to 42, 10-speed cassette derailleur with the nice little clutch, so you can lock that in the up position. It's kind of like a mountain biking thing, so you don't get as much bounce in the chain. The drivetrain is awesome. I'm actually a fan of cassettes and derailleurs because they tend to be a little bit lighter and more affordable. So this is about $6,500 US. This is a 2021 model. The colors have changed a little bit for 2022. Cube sent this over a while back to City Cycles in Langley, and I just hadn't had a chance to look at it. The other day I checked out the Urban Arrow family, and I was like, wow, these bikes are very, very similar. So I'm going to talk about some of the differences that I've noticed, but I just wanted to call that out. If you want to pay a little bit more for the cargo hybrid, you would get the Enviolo continuously variable transmission. A little bit heavier, but you can shift it standstill, a little bit cleaner because you don't have a derailleur hanging down. And then all of these bikes come in a single battery option or a dual battery option, and that second battery would mount right there to the front of this box. So Power Pack 500, just like the Urban Arrow had. This actually has the 4th generation Bosch Performance Line Cargo with 85 Newton meters of torque, same motor. So it's a really comparable setup. Even the brakes here, these are the Magura e-bike specific CME5 with 4-finger levers, the extra big reservoir for the oils, quad piston calipers, 203 millimeter rotor in the rear, 180 millimeter up front. One thing I noticed and appreciated, it's kind of interesting, the front doesn't have quick release like the Urban Arrow did, but the rear does. And I find that, you know, a little bit more weight as a captain or on a normal bike where you didn't have the big cargo bay, I'm usually messing around with the rear wheel a little bit more. I don't think you'd get quick release if you had the Enviolo setup, but I thought that was kind of funny. They sort of swapped. Really nice equipment all around on this thing. So we've got really good Alex rims. They're Cube branded, but we've got that reinforcement eyelet, nice sturdy spokes, really great tires. The wheel size is one of the first things that's different. So this is 27.5 by 2.4 back here, and the front is 20 by 2.15, and this is a Schwabe balloon, you know, big bend. So it's kind of interesting to see the Supermoto X back here a little bit wider, going to give you a little bit more comfort, and taller than the Urban Arrow. That was 26 inch, so 27.5. It gives you a lower attack angle. It's going to smooth out the ride for the captain. Now this bike is actually, it seems like it has a longer reach, a little bit taller minimum saddle height, and even this bar right here, it's not that super low like step through. This is a bit more of a mid step, and I think by doing it this way, they were able to get a lot of strength without adding quite as much material. So this bike is a little bit lighter. It's like 99.5 pounds compared to about 110 for the other bike. But again, some of that comes back to that Enviolo that one had. So these aren't like apples to apples, but there are a lot of similarities. Interestingly, this one has a suspension fork up here, so 80 millimeters of travel, SR Suntour Mobi A32 with kind of a lockout and preload, so you can preload that spring if you're carrying a lot of weight. I think the capacity up here is like 130, 140 pounds, which is interesting. I think it's a little bit lower capacity, and you do have to pay a bit extra to get even the standard bench seat, which is set up for 2 passengers, 2 kids, right? And there isn't an option for like a front bench seat that I saw, although they do have a really nice canopy. Similar concept, sort of hangs over the front, and you can see down in and talk to your passengers. And that's the beauty of these front-loading cargo bikes. You can be up here riding and keep an eye on your cargo, or maybe even have a conversation, and then your passengers can see where you're going and enjoy the ride a bit more than if they were mounted to a rack back here or even a trailer. Now there is a really cool rack option that Cube offers for kind of all their bikes. Their fenders are already pretty good, 75 millimeter width, plastic. They got this integrated 4 LED light, really works well. You can see the connection point down here. There's some threaded eyelets. So they have, it's called like the SIC 27.5 to fit these 27.5 inch wheels, and it would connect to the fender itself. So that's an optional accessory. I don't know the weight rating off the top of my head, but it's a good way to have your panniers or maybe your trunk bag if the kids are up here and you're kicking stuff and having fun. So that's nice, very comparable. You know, the pedals, the cranks, everything's fairly standard down here, 170 millimeter length. Again, branded ACID, which is like the Cube branding for all their stuff. but they're actually by Samex. These are forged aluminum alloy. We've got kind of basic pedals. They're the plastic kind with a little bit of rubber tread. Something I might look at replacing. It's interesting because a lot of this bike is a little bit more mountain bike hardware from what I can see. This is 31.8 millimeter handlebar, and it's actually 100 millimeters longer than the Urban Aero family. By the way, both of the bikes seem to be similar width and similar length, so you're still going to be able to fit through most doorways pretty easily, but having a little bit of a longer bar, it just slows down the steering. And they actually have this Viscoset headset in here, and so viscous is like it's a little bit slower, and you know, as you steer this, there's a little bit of extra energy you have to put in to steer, and it just feels stable and smooth and slow, like a big truck or something, and the handlebars contribute to that feeling. Nice ergonomic locking rubber grips. We talked about the brakes and everything before. Kind of a cheap little flick bell, but it's compact, stays out of the way. And then this headset right here is connected to a stem that's called the speedlifter. It gives you 60 millimeters of height adjustment, so you can raise and lower this. Most fancy cargo bikes and stuff, even if they cost a lot, they tend to come in one frame size, and then they just give you some adjustability options. So a 430 millimeter seat post, 30.9 millimeter diameter, so you could of course do a suspension seat post back here in addition to the higher volume tire with the lower attack angle we talked about. So that's some comfort. The saddle's pretty nice and stuff, but being able to raise that really high and then raise this is going to be a good option for taller riders. And it even kind of has that, you know, sporty look like a mountain bike, which is neat to see. I like the orange accents and everything, and of course I appreciate the reflective sidewalls on these tires, front and rear. It's going to keep you, the visual footprint of the bike just elevates that a little bit. Now before I show you the lights, I want to mention that everything on this bike is aluminum alloy, like except for maybe the core here on the stanchions and stuff on the suspension fork. But this steering rod is aluminum alloy, the lowers, the upper on this, the handlebar, like even this steering rod down here, aluminum alloy, and a lot of that was steel on the Urban Aero. And steel, of course, if you get a scratch in that, it can rust over time. So it was really interesting to see that, you know, they chose aluminum alloy, and then how they just put the bike together. You can see the welds, and then that mid step versus the step through we talked about, the extra bars right here. The frame like bolts together, so I'm wondering what this looked like when it arrived at the dealer. Both Cube and Urban Aero are kind of a dealer-centric brands where you get some support. They've got a little bit more warranty coverage. Of course, Bosch products, kind of a 2-year comprehensive, and they support their products for a long time. Similar weight distribution here with the batteries at the center of the bike, the motor low down there, 6.4 pounds with like a magnesium housing for the Bosch motor. And maybe I'll talk a little bit more about the drivetrain here and the motor before we show those lights. I'm excited to show you because they're very cool, but yeah, basically this thing is measuring your rear wheel speed. See a little spoke magnet here and a sensor. It's measuring your pedal cadence and pedal torque over 1,000 times per second, and it has shift detection. So when it senses a little bit of extra tension going through, it tries to back off, because 85 Newton meters of torque is a lot. I think it's like 400% support feedback. It's one of their most powerful motors, and it's very smooth, it's very natural, but there is a lot of power going through, and when you have a derailleur in these steps instead of that continuously variable transmission option, it's just nice that the motor is designed to sort of protect itself. So standard steel chain ring, 38 tooth. We got this little plastic chain ring guard. It's not quite as nice as like a full cover, but then you sort of look at the orientation, and maybe your pants are sort of protected by this extra tubing. There's no frame lock back here, but it looks like you could add one later if you wanted. There's some mounting points for that. Interestingly, they chose the cheaper keys from ABUS. These are the Amparo. They can't be keyed alike to match, so if you did get a frame lock, you'd have to get a separate set of keys and stuff. Given how heavy this thing is, you could just take a chain and just run it through and kind of make your own, maybe connect it to a post or something at the same time. So yeah, in terms of coverage, interesting that they've got wider fenders, but then they didn't do anything with the chain right here. The Urban Aero family had like this plastic chain glider that was just completely sealed in. Might even be a little bit quieter just because of how the drivetrain was set up. Oh, and by the way, the box, of course, this is EPP, expanded polypropylene, the same stuff that they use to make helmets, so it does kind of crush down a little bit for safety, but it's also rigid and it's fairly lightweight. Again, at about, 99, 100 pounds weight on this. And while we're talking about weight, that battery pack over there, it weighs about 5.7 pounds, and it's one of my favorite batteries on the market. It's the Bosch Power Pack 500. I'm gonna take it off since we got the keys in hand. Just insert like that, twist, and then tip out like that. Got a nice handle so it's not as easy to drop. Of course, this is one of the more expensive parts of the bike, and it's nice that you can take it off so quickly and easily, because extreme cold, extreme heat can be hard on these. You don't want to let them drain all the way down, and even if it's not on the bike, you can check the battery capacity with this little LED charge level indicator on the side. So we're very full. Yeah, interestingly, the interface, it's the same for the Power Pack 400. So maybe you have another electric bike that has a Power Pack. They're all interchangeable. Maybe you could get that second bracket right there, and you could use a 500 and a 400 in combination. Or if you're on an adventure or something, the battery breaks or you need to replace it. I just love how modular and common these are. They're really great batteries, 36 volt, 13.4 amp hours. So if you combine the two of these, two 500 watt hour packs, you get like a kilowatt hour of capacity, which is going to extend your range. And of course, that's important when you're really loaded up with weight. The battery charger they give you is quite good. It's one of my favorites, standard charger from Bosch, 4 amp output. So it's a little bit faster, only weighs like 1.75 pounds, and it has this proprietary plug interface that's not easy to get mixed up with your other electronics, which I definitely appreciate. In terms of like the charging port location on the bike, it's a little bit tucked away down there. You want to make sure it clicks when you're getting it back in there, but the charging port's like right down here, so it seems like it's a little bit tricky to get to the cover and stuff, but you can still reach it and plug it in. And I like that it's not in the path of the crank arms. It's something I complain about sometimes, just in case these get bumped. So a couple of highlights I really want to praise here are the bottle cage mounting right there, right where you want it, easy to reach. It doesn't interfere with your standover. It doesn't interfere with the batteries. It's built in. You don't have to pay extra for a mount or anything. Great job. I didn't notice this when I was filming, but you can actually see a second bottle cage mount below that top tube. I think that's awesome. Really good attention to detail, Cube. I also appreciate that their seat post has these little markings on it. I've got it kind of far down, but it's got those little lines, so you can remember if you're sharing this in a family, where your position was, and just raise it and lower it really quickly and easily. And then the lights. So we've got the Bosch Intuvia up here. I've already powered it on so I can show you the lights. The light button turns them on and turns them off. It's not locked, which was the case with the Urban Arrow. And then check this out. We've got the side cutout windows on that headlight. I love it. And this thing points where you steer. It's kind of exactly what you'd expect. The light is mounted to the arch, so it's going to bounce around a little bit more. It's not on the bike that's sprung, it's unsprung. So a little bit of a complaint, but otherwise I appreciate that it gives you a little bit more just visibility. And then this rear light, it kind of seems cheap when you first see it. When it's off, it's just like, yeah, it's a little piece of plastic, but it's not really sticking out, which means it could get bumped or broken more easily. It's really, it just feels durable. And then it's got 4 LEDs, and you can see them from a lot of different angles. It's very bright. It's actually pretty impressive. So I'm actually a fan of that. I think they've done a good job. These box bikes, they're heavy. It's a lot of work to even just transport this from the shop, which again is nice if the shop has a van or they have some sort of solution to help you get this thing home. They do tend to be a little bit lower to the ground. That front wheel being smaller means the box is easier to load or climb up in. I think that might be a step there for kids to put their feet in and just hop right in. The maintenance and stuff, for me, the CVT is a little bit more screwing around if you need to replace your tire tube, but thankfully both of these tires have a puncture-resistant rating, as well as the reflective sidewalls and stuff, so they should hold up pretty well. I would recommend keeping an eye on the tire pressure. I think it's 30 to 55. You don't want to go too low, which again is comfortable, but it's less efficient, and you get the pinch flats. And then if you don't get the CVT, if you get this standard drivetrain, it's just a lot easier with the quick release and everything. So yeah, to me, this is pretty attractive. It's appealing. I think these are a lot of fun, and it's a great way to get the kids out. If you've got 2 kids, this could work. If you've got more, you know, you might want to look at that Urban Arrow. And then in terms of like child seat adapters and stuff, I think there are some different options, but there's quite a few places where you could bolt your own thing in as well, and they've kind of got the drainage on the floor. To me, this is a little bit more utilitarian, a little bit sportier than the Urban Arrow family, but they're both really premium products, you know, very custom made, internal cable routing, e-bike specific brakes, all that stuff. So with that said, let's get into the display. This is one of my favorite displays. This is the Bosch Intuvia. It's an older display. It's been around for quite a few years now. It is removable, so you can take this off, and keeps people from tampering with it, and might keep the screen in better shape if you're parking at a crowded public location. There's a little coin battery in here, so it sort of remembers some things. You can power it on even before you mount it to the bike. So here we go. It's grayscale, got a fairly large display readout, and then a bunch of different icons here. We got a battery infographic with 5 dots, so each dot is like 20%, leaves something to be desired. All the new Bosch displays have a percentage, so it's like 1% increments, but thankfully this has a range estimator, and that really helps, especially with a big bike like this. You don't want to get stuck far from home with 100 pounds of bike and who knows what in the cargo bay. Then we've got assist level here. There is Eco, Tour, Sport, and Turbo, and then on the right there's a little power meter, so it shows how hard the motor is working. We've got the light indicator, so the lights are on right now. Current speed, it's in kilometers per hour, but if you hold reset and I, you can adjust some of the other settings in here, including like language and the wheel size and stuff like that. Down here we got trip distance, but if we press I or I here, it's going to cycle through some other readouts. So we'll go and see the clock, the max speed, average speed, trip time, range, and this is what I was talking about. It says 33 kilometers in turbo. If we press the minus button and go down to Eco, 72 kilometers. So it's like we doubled our range just by using the lower level of support. Of course, it's not going to be nearly as powerful and satisfying. You're going to do more work. And then odometer, and we're back to trip distance. So it just cycles all the way around. Over here on the right, there's a little micro USB charging port, if I can get it open with my gloves. And that puts out, I think, 5 volts, 500 milliamps, which is not as much as you'd want for some of the newer smartphones and stuff. Some of the other Bosch displays, like the Kiox and the Nion, they also have USB charging. I think gives you a little bit more power output. And then they work with the eBike Connect smartphone app from Bosch. The cool thing is you can work with your shop, pay for one of those displays, and then I think they can install it. So their systems are interchangeable that way. The only thing you can't do is get the newest e-bike smart system from Bosch, which has like a power tube battery and some other LED control pad and stuff. It's like a totally separate generation. It's not compatible. So I wanted to point that out. Here's the button pad over here. We got the plus minus for changing assist level, the I button, all very easy to reach and feel. That's rubberized, so you don't even have to look down. You just kind of start to memorize it. And then at the top, there's walk mode, which is really cool. If you press walk and then hold plus, the bike will kind of push itself forward like that, which could be very handy if maybe you got a flat tire or you're just in a place where it doesn't feel safe to ride. To be honest with you, the turning on this, you know, it's not like super aggressive. A couple times I've like wanted to turn harder and faster, but because the wheelbase is so long, it just takes a little bit longer, and I've had to, you know, put my foot down to stabilize the bike. If we just push the bike forward like this, kickstand automatically, and when you're ready to put it back up, you just push down there, pull the bike back, and now it's in the loading position. Okay, so here we go. I'm going to take it up to maybe sport mode, because it is so dynamic. If I pedal hard, it'll give me the power I need, but it's not going to overwhelm me. There we go. Feeling pretty good. Kind of that floaty steering. Let's do a little suspension test. Feeling my toe hit that metal a little bit. If you have really long feet or your foot's in the wrong position like mine is, you might have a little strike there on the frame tubing. Not a big deal. I feel like the motor's pretty quiet, but it can get louder when you're pedaling at a higher rate, so like a higher RPM. One of the things that's cool about the Bosch Performance Line motors is they give you over 120 RPM. So basically, as you shift down and you're spinning faster and faster, kind of a low gear, there are some motors where it's you kind of lose motor support. That's not the case with these Bosch Performance Line motors. They're some of my favorite. Before filming this, I went online and searched some forums and stuff and got feedback. A couple people said, you know, the rear fender could be a little bit stronger. So far, it's working well for me, but I was surprised to hear a little bit of jingling and stuff. I don't know if maybe it's the kickstand bouncing up and down a little bit, but otherwise it's really tight, and a lot of good positive things were said online. People were like, yeah, it's reliable, it's stiff, and so far it's working great for me. So again, 38 tooth on the standard chainring down there, no protector, but it seems to be working pretty well. I'm gonna pedal fast, I'm gonna shift some gears, and you can listen for the motor. Let's do it. Very nice. And I want to point out that the shifter mechanisms on this bike are great. Got a two-way lever, the Shimano, so you can push it with your thumb or pull it with your pointer finger, and then a three-step low lever, so you can really dump the gears and get those low climbing gears quickly if you want to. It's a good setup. Here we go, testing out the suspension. About as fast as I could turn it, but still had to go off-road. Thank you so much for your help, man. Well, guys, I think that's about it. The sun is coming out. I had a lot of fun checking this bike out, especially since I just reviewed another sort of cargo box bike the other day. I've got a bunch back at ElectricBikeReview.com. You can see them side to side, and maybe share your own feedback in the forums or in the comments. I do my best to measure everything so you can kind of come to your own conclusions. I did want to call out, they're using the old spoke magnet kind of thing that can get bumped side to side. So if you do get one of these and you get a read error, that's the first place I'd check. And Bosch does have some newer ones that connect to the hub and are a little bit more protected. Otherwise, it feels like they're using some of the latest and greatest and picking some of my favorite parts that are either affordable or lightweight. These bikes are just a whole lot of fun, and they really give you so many possibilities. I love the higher volume rear tire decision, and I also love the suspension fork they went with. So as usual, I love you, ride safe, and we'll see you next time.